some folks are beginning to flow in. We will start promptly at 12:05 or 5 past the hour. And in the meantime, feel free to introduce yourself. I know on the right-hand side of your screen, there's both the event chat as well as the session chat. So I highly encourage everyone, probably best to use the session chat so you can see all the other attendees. And feel free to put your introduction and maybe, let's see, for an icebreaker, tell us your name, tell us what industry you work in, and something you're excited about for the summer. So add that prompt in chat as well. Let's see. Name. Yeah. Great. All right, I've shared the prompt in chat. Hopefully folks can see. Based on the screen, I see there's currently 14 people in the audience. So minusing Penelope and I, we should see some good engagement and intro in the chat.
Awesome.
Oh, hey, Elpa, welcome. Penelope, I see one of your team members is here today to support you.
Hello.
How
Very
exciting. That's great. Yeah, as new folks are joining us, we're starting at 5 past the hour. So in the meantime, feel free to send your intro to the right of the screen. You'll see a session chat. That's a great place to share your introductions. Hopefully you can see the chats from earlier, and I've asked you to share maybe your name, a customer problem you're solving for, and something you're excited about for the summer. Great. Yeah, so a couple minutes. I think T-minus 2 minute countdown, and then we'll start shortly. Yeah, Penelope, can you hear my dog barking in the background? I just want to make sure.
I hear him a little bit.
Okay, a little bit. Okay.
A little bit.
My dog's all the way upstairs, so hopefully it's not too loud. Otherwise, I will make sure I'm mute while we're in presentation as well.
Oh, no worries. Maybe your dog has good feedback. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely barks in encouragement a lot of the times. So.
Enthusiasm for product management.
Yes. Yeah, she's a product buddy. All right, I see we have some folks making their intros. Hi, Carol. Hi, Alpa. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Jess. Looks like we have a great range of folks who are solving very different kind of problems. That's awesome. Hi, Pearl. And quick reminder as well, there is going to be mixers and networking events later throughout the session. So if you have a moment, this is a good time to customize your profile, for example, including your LinkedIn link so that you can stay in touch afterwards as well. And you should be able to do that relatively quickly by clicking on, again, top right of the screen, the little circle, which might have your photo. And if you click on that, you can edit your profile. And we will be starting in a minute. I see we are now up to 18 attendees. It's a great group. Welcome, Regan. Welcome, Saran. Oh, fantastic. And everyone sharing their excitement about barbecues in the summer and picnicking. Hi, Kai. Welcome. All right, so it is 12:05, so we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. First, I'll start with a quick intro. My name is Lisa, and I'm currently building products at Microsoft to protect companies from 99.9% of cybersecurity attacks. So if you have been seeing in the news around breaches and data leaks, I think there was a big one on Twilio recently. That's kind of what my product is focused on. And before joining Microsoft, I built my career over a decade across very different industries, from aerospace to consulting to finance and digital marketing, and had a short stint as an entrepreneur as well. To set the scene, welcome everyone. You are currently here with us at the Women in Product Senior Leaders Edition Product Blenders. So really this series is focused on growth and networking forum for senior as well as executive product leaders, typically those who are director level and above. And I know as women in product, many of us embrace a growth mindset and are constantly learning new skills and staying updated on topics that are especially applicable at the leadership level. So really excited to have you. And today we're going to get to learn about prioritizing for impact with Penelope Madry. So the brief, just to remind you in case you are coming from a meeting that has taken up all of your mind space, setting the scene, we are going to focus on learning around prioritizing work with your stakeholders, such as engineering teams. And the goal is really to minimize the surprises to ensure you have consistency, you're building trust, and ultimately reducing the time and energy a PM on your team may need to spend on execution. So now we'll do a quick intro for Penelope and then hand off for the main bulk of presentation today. Penelope Madry is VP of Product Management in a tech organization at American Express. And her team of skilled product managers and owners design and deliver critical capabilities that enable Amex customers to see their transactions, receive bills, maintain and change their account info, and so much more. So really the digital experience. Penelope is passionate about giving customers the best possible user experience by solving complex problems with data, imagination, and empathy. She brings over 20 years of experience having held roles spanning financial services and the nonprofit world. And outside of work, Penelope enjoys running, reading, and cooking with her husband and son in Port Washington, New York. We're very excited today and welcome, Penelope. We'll hand off over to you now.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and welcome everybody. Super excited to see you all here and see all the chat introductions. So wonderful to see all these great professionals here coming together to talk about a great topic. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to specifically share the presentation, which is more relevant than my whole screen. Okay, so as Lisa already mentioned, there's an option to complete your profile at the top. So that's a great way to share your information with others. There's just some more navigation tips around chat, leaving a review, reaching out to others, troubleshooting. So some helpful tips on troubleshooting if you're having any difficulties with Hopin. Okay, so I'm Penelope Madry. And this is a slide about me. Obviously, I have some education. But the point is that I have over 20 years of experience, like Lisa mentioned, between the education and for-profit financial world. So a wide range with a variety of organizations. And so while I work at American Express today, I'm going to draw on all of that experience as I share this approach that I've come to over these 20 years. So prioritizing for impact, this methodology is really about reducing emergencies, reducing surprises, being a consistent deliverer of value to your stakeholders, to your customers. And the whole point will be it builds that trust with all of your stakeholders, your customers, and you will get out of the weeds of the day-to-day firefighting because you have this running like clockwork, like a machine, and you will be able to focus your energy and your political capital on developing that product strategy. So we're going to talk through emergencies, staying in business, maintenance, optimizing for speed, and customer delight. So let me just make sure there we go. Oops, wrong application. Here we go. All right, so in the chat, let's all share a time when your sprint plan got derailed by something unexpected. What happened? How did it impact your customers? Something that comes to mind that was a hot topic earlier this year was the Log4j vulnerability that I think derailed a few folks' plans. So that could have been something that happened to you, or it could be perhaps, a certificate expired. That certainly happened to me before. So what is an example of something that has derailed your plan and the team had to swarm around something else? Put that in the chat. COVID. That is very true. Sales commitment. Yep. Lack of childcare. App denial. Okay. Exec priorities. Another high priority project. Failing infrastructure. Payment provider cutoff access. Wow, all these are so good. Exec stakeholder changes their mind. I don't know what you're talking about. That never happens to me. Technical issues, blocker bugs, system down. Yep, totally. Slowdown in shipping. Oh, interesting. Good one. Yeah, so many good ones in there. And that is so true. Like, that is just a part of our lives. We have to roll with it. And so the big part that we need to be thinking about as product professionals is how to plan for it. How do we plan for emergencies? So I think the number one thing I have to say about emergencies is have a clear plan of action with your team before emergencies occur, so that when an emergency does happen, your team is a well-oiled machine that can just handle it. And so that means clearly defining what is a blocker issue, what is a critical issue. It means that everyone on your team knows that you're going to ask who's impacted. What is the severity of the impact? Is there some sort of time sensitivity around this issue? Is there a workaround? Like, if they know those 4 questions that you're going to ask them, then they're going to have those answers ready for you when you meet with your team to decide how you're going to address it and what gets deprioritized. So really have that plan of action. And so every sprint, you should be reserving capacity for emergencies. There should be a little bit of capacity reserved for, and if an emergency doesn't happen, then great, the team gets to pull another story off the backlog. But that is so key. And then that then, because you've planned for an emergency, it doesn't disrupt the other things that are in flight because you've already got capacity reserved for it. Another thing that's kind of related is staying in business. So I say that because sometimes an issue can come up that perhaps you didn't realize, and it becomes an emergency, but it is a part of staying in business. So for example, I work for American Express. We are a bank. We are highly regulated. And so that means that we have to be on top of any sort of regulatory changes or guidelines. And so that is something that I work with other stakeholders within American Express Bank to understand what regulations are coming down the road so that I can plan for that. And typically that means that there's going to be a date by when we need to be compliant. And so usually that is something that I can plan for and put into my backlog and put into my roadmap. And so that's usually not a surprise. It can be a surprise, though, if perhaps you realize that you're not compliant with an existing regulation, or it could be like a privacy issue where, as technology professionals, privacy is critical to whatever we do. And so if you realize it, for example, a Log4j security issue, you need to jump on that right away. So sometimes these things can be a little bit related. Okay. Okay, so maintenance and optimizing for speed. So can you think of something that takes a particularly long time to complete? And what I mean is, it could be something that your engineering team has to do, and you're like, I don't understand why this takes so long. Why does it take a whole sprint? Or why does this take 2 sprints to do? Or can you think of something that your engineering team must do that feels like busy work? Like it's not very complex engineering work. It's something that's feels very small, but they have to do it regularly, and it almost feels like a waste of time in some ways. Put that in the chat. Completing test cases to enable QA. Manual processes we just can't get out of, I guess. Researching a tech stack doesn't feel small or waste of time, but often a multi-month effort. Interesting. Patching, uplifting to new versions, QA processes, sometimes documentation, migrating data to new systems. Yep. Partner certifications, audits, super fun. And I would argue that the audit, it kind of falls into the staying in business bucket. But yeah, those can be quite time consuming and laborious. Tech debt, yep, absolutely. So these are all, constantly taking platform improvements refactor. Yep. All good, all great examples. For maintenance, when I think of maintenance, I think of like a lot of the things that people said, like database or software upgrades or disaster recovery testing. Like these are things that you have to do to maintain your system. And usually you can identify that ahead of time. Usually, for example, if you partner with your tech partners, you know that, okay, this database or this piece of software is no longer going to be supported and we need to upgrade to the latest version, or we need to migrate to something else. So if you're working with your tech partners closely, you can usually plan that in advance. Usually that isn't a surprise. And you just plan it as needed. It doesn't have to be something that is planned for every single sprint, typically. Now, optimizing for speed. Now, this is something that I find is the most challenging, and some of the most valuable work can come out of it. And it's really critical for product management to be thinking about this in the scope of their roadmap. And the reason why I say this is, one, optimizing for speed enables you to free up engineers to work on higher value work. So figuring out how you might automate something or reduce the time it takes to complete a particular task. Or it could be taking work off of their plate and giving it to some other team to do. And so this is crucial in order for you to always be getting the most out of the engineering team that you do have, because there aren't infinite budgets so far. And so you do have a limit to how many engineers you get. So I think this is really something that I've struggled with in the past. And so I came up with 3 examples that I wanted to share with you. One example, the first example is probably the easiest. So talked to an engineer and they said, I want to automate pull requests. It's part of the development process and they wanted to automate part of this process. And they said it will reduce a developer's waiting time by 2 minutes, or they'll save 2 minutes. And so that meant that, instead of going to get a cup of coffee, they could be doing some actual development work. Well, and if you think about, it saves it a pull request by 2 minutes. It saves the engineer 2 minutes. Well, if they do 10 pull requests in a day, that's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes that they could be spend building your next great feature or fixing a bug. And so, so I was like, yeah, let's do that. And it was like one story in a sprint and then it was done. And then developers had more time and they were happier because they didn't feel like their time was wasted. So that's that's a small, simple example of optimizing for speed. A larger example of optimizing for speed that took more than just a sprint was and this is actually in a few different systems that I've worked in, where the system, when it was getting going and it was new and just launching, there was page content, so text that was on the web page embedded in the code. And that was fine to launch, but after a while, after a couple of years, it became a drag to have an engineer have to take a story to update just text in the page because we didn't have a content editor yet. And so taking the time to externalize the content, put a content editor on it, and then enable, somebody else within the organization, a marketing person, to update that content so that does not have to go to an engineer, that has real value. And quantifying that value is so critical to you being able to prioritize that work and defend that work when other people come with other priorities. And then my last example is even sort of larger work, comparable, but maybe larger, is for a couple of the systems that I've worked on, we've taken the effort to externalize business rules. And so these are rules where it's basically configuring the system for different scenarios, because maybe different user journeys have specific use cases that need to be accommodated, and so it needs to be configured. And so though that logic could be embedded in the code, and that's fine, but in some cases it's really helpful to externalize those business rules so that it can be configured. Maybe you might even put a UI on top of it so that perhaps an administrator or a service person could configure these user journeys. And so, again, focusing on the outcomes that you're trying to drive is so important in defending this work and delivering it and helping the rest of your organization see the value. So for this particular piece of work, we were able to deliver small changes faster because either the user themselves could make the change, or we could have another team that's less skilled than the Scrum team make those changes in the configuration and deliver that value much quicker, because it doesn't have to go through the whole sprint process and planning process, which means that stakeholders get value quicker, your customers get value quicker. It then means that your highly skilled engineers are working on more complex work. And lastly, and this one has been something that's been quite on my mind, is externalizing those rules so that somebody who is not an engineer can see them, read them, understand how the system works is really valuable, because that's basically the system producing its own documentation. And in an era where there's been the big resignation and turnover at companies is higher than we're used to, having a system that generates its own documentation is really useful and can be a great resource for the rest of the team. So that's optimizing for speed and why I think that it's so critical to anybody's product strategy. Okay. Moving on. So customer delight. Now this is the thing, this is the stuff we love, right? This is why we become product managers. So share something that you have built that you are proud of, and why are you proud of it? And share it in the chat. And I see you guys are thinking. I'm going to say that one thing that I recall working on way long time ago, I worked for a company that built software for investment advisors and wealth managers. And it was a great system, very popular, but it could be a challenge to get data out of it. And that was particularly a problem when an investment advisor or a wealth manager was getting examined by the SEC, because they had to get data out to respond to the SEC's examination. And so we came up with a report that was specifically built for exactly what the SEC would ask for in the format that they wanted it. And it made our customers' lives easy. They felt like we had their back, and the SEC was happy because a lot of the people that they audited or examined had our software. So it was a win-win all the way around. So going to the chat, new add-on package had to get major stakeholder buy-in. Yeah, getting tough stakeholders to align, that is something to be proud of. Data platform to empower customers to leverage satellite imagery, geospatial data to manage crop yields. I am passionate about food security and climate change, so I am proud of the work we did to help farmers and ultimately communities. That's awesome. Tool for someone to discover their growth areas to be more inclusive with their colleagues. Also awesome. Live video appointment infrastructure to support members with diabetes. Great. Google app publishing experience, also great. So many great things in the chat. Guided experience for discovering your family history at Ancestry. Risk rules that minimize losses for small and medium sellers. Great. Such great stuff. Planning tool for NASA mission tool. That sounds pretty amazing. Uber rides pickup experience at airports. I've definitely used that. So many great things to be proud of. No, you can be proud of more than just NASA. I mean, NASA's awesome, but that's awesome. You guys, this is an amazing crowd, I have to say. Super excited to be amongst you. Sorry, I'm distracted by all the amazing things happening in the chat. So customer delight. So like so many awesome things that we've seen in the chat. We're trying to increase client satisfaction, solve customer problems, solve prospect problems. We're trying to, that's the meat. That's the exciting part of being a product manager. And I would say that's probably why a lot of other people in the company like to try out being a product manager by coming up with features too. But it's all right. We can all crowdsource good ideas. So obviously customer delight is a new capability. It's a new customer journey. Typically you're going to be working on something around customer delight every sprint. And the outcome that you're trying to drive is value for the customer and value for the company. And so I think, it's an important aspect to think about, your target customer and are they delighted? And something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is your design inclusive? So are you delighting all the customers that you're trying to reach? So that kind of gets us into the next step of revisiting your product strategy regularly. And so, as you think about your product strategy, I've broken it into five pieces. So, you should have some company OKRs. You should have some goals, objectives that you as a company are trying to deliver on. And so I know there are product managers who every day come in and see how many converted members do they have that day, or where are they with their revenue targets. And so there are some people who are checking these OKRs every day. I'm not saying that you have to do it every day, but definitely you need to do it on a regular basis to understand where your product is at. I think that one thing that's important about being consistent and visiting with all these five categories, especially the company OKRs, is when you know where you and your product sit, then when somebody else, like a senior leader in your company, comes to you and says, hey, I have an idea for a new thing, or, oh, I want to change the strategy, or, oh, I want to do that, then you can say, well, okay, that's cool. Let's understand how this is going to drive the outcomes that we're trying to drive. Let me ask you, what is it that you think this new thing is going to accomplish? What is the outcome that it's going to impact? And let's talk about that. So I think holding the other stakeholders in your company accountable to these outcomes can really help you drive your product strategy and ensure that they stay focused on the OKRs and don't get distracted by, oh, well, a competitor has this button here, so we should have a button here. So I think keeping it focused on those OKRs can be really helpful. Certainly data is key. As product managers, I think we all know that we love our data, and it's really important in making the case for any changes to any OKRs. As we think about anybody coming in with some new feature or a new thing that they would like to put in the product, you can also ask them, well, what is your hypothesis of what this will do? What is your hypothesis of the outcome that it's going to drive? And then you can devise a lightweight way of testing that hypothesis. So it could be a manual process. It could be maybe some lightweight dashboard. It could be A/B testing. You could just talk with the users. I'm going to give you an example of something where we did not test the hypothesis and we built something that did not work out. So I worked for an education nonprofit that recruited people into their teacher training program. And so my software was a software that recruited people, that received their applications, and then the applications went through a rigorous screening process. And a part of that screening process was the proposal was to hide applicants' names, just their names. And the outcome that they were trying to drive was they wanted a greater diversity in the people that participated in the program in the end. So who were accepted and then participated in this teacher training program. They wanted that to be a diverse group of people. And so they thought, okay, if we hide the names on the applications, it will impact diversity at the end. And so, and there was some data in the world about hiding names as being helpful. And that, like when people were applying to jobs, people with different names got scrutinized a bit more. And so they thought, okay, we'll hide people's names. So we built this big piece of functionality to hide people's names when they were going through this screening process, hide the applicant names when they were going through the screening process, so that the screeners would not see their names and would just be, looking at the content of the application. And the end result was it did not end up in a more diverse class. It's not to say that it was a bad idea, but had we tested it out, maybe with a manual process beforehand, perhaps we could have just determined that that wasn't the lever that was going to get us to a more diverse class, and that we needed to look at other levers to get us to a more diverse class. So that's just one example where we didn't test out our hypothesis. We spent engineering capacity to build something that didn't have the impact that we were hoping it to have. And the lights are going out in my office. I'm going to go turn on my lights, but something else to be thinking about in terms of your product strategy is customers and prospects. So with customers and prospects, frequently they want different things, but you want to be checking in on them. It could be surveys, focus groups. It could be feedback from your customer support team. It could be data about the user experience, where people are getting stuck in the user experience, or where they're focusing on the pages. It could be market research. But this is, as product managers, we are charged with being experts in the customer as well as an advocate for the customer. So really learning the customer deeply is important. And it gets back to that comment that I made earlier about inclusive product design. That could be, in some cases, it could be that that's just an untapped or unserved segment of your customer base that perhaps if you optimized your site for somebody with low vision or no vision, maybe that could have a big impact on your product. So definitely being close to who your customers are, the problems they're trying to solve, and their own experiences and circumstances has a huge impact. And then product metrics, which again, I'm sure you all are on top of this and checking this all the time. It could be your product availability, it could be page load times, API response times, all those things that are really important to ensuring that your product is successful and operating and competing at the level that you want to be competing at. And then competitive threats and media. I'll give an example of the influence of media on product strategy. I worked at a company a number of years ago where the media had talked a lot about the quality being poor. And so the leadership of the company decided, okay, we are not going to build any new features for 6 months. We're just going to fix bugs and automate test cases. That's what we're going to do for 6 months. And that it was really hard. Like, business stakeholders in the company were not happy with this. But in the end, it was the right decision. It enabled the product to get to a much more stable, predictable, customer-friendly place, as well as it established a culture within the team of quality matters. And so that was also super critical and super valuable. So we're going to go into the breakout sessions now. Let's talk about what in this prioritization methodology have you not done before, or what do you think might be challenging about it? Would love to hear your thoughts and super excited for you guys to come back and share out after you've done your breakouts. I'm going to go to the slides that show about joining the breakout session. So you can see there's enter mixer area using the left nav. You can click join now. You can also, while you're in it, you can see how much time you have. You can extend the time you have, and you can request a connection with the person that you get paired up with. And then you can find your new connections when you click on your picture in the home section and connections. And then you're going to watch an announcement. Announcement will pop up to say you're going to rejoin this group, rejoin us here, and you can select sessions from the navigation and you click back in. All right.
Great. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I think that was a lot of great insights and learning. Just really want to encourage everyone to go into the one-on-one mixer, since, as we mentioned, everyone here are senior product leaders. So it's a great opportunity to both network as well as share stories from the battlefield. And as someone who is leading change and driving teams forward for impact, I think it would be a great time to share those stories. Given that we are at 12:40 right now, I think hopefully, and I'm asking for probably Ariana's help since she'll be sending out the announcement, if we can shorten the one-on-one to about 10 minutes. Oh, great. I see she's already posted. It will be a 10-minute chat. Yeah, so at this point, encourage everyone to go back to the left menu bar. You'll see under people, it's a handshake kind of symbol, and that's where you'll be able to join the one-on-one mixer. And then in 10 minutes, which is 50 past the hour, we'll bring you back so that we can wrap up and conclude before we send you off.
As we talked about, prioritizing for impact is basically thinking about all the things that you could be doing for your product and prioritizing on a regular basis: capacity for emergencies, staying in business, maintenance, optimizing for speed, and then, of course, customer delight. And then for the customer delight bucket, regularly revisiting your product strategy. So thinking about your company OKRs, thinking about researching and understanding your customers and prospects, always reviewing and being on top of your product metrics, understanding the competitive threats and the impact of media on your product and your company strategy. So these are the key takeaways. And I think the main point of all of this is to say, if you can be prioritizing for these things on a regular basis and delivering on a regular cadence that builds trust with your stakeholders and your customers and your engineering team, and you can then leverage that time that you would have spent fighting fires to instead focus on your product strategy and focus on your customers. And so that's what I hope you take away from today, and that's what I hope you can leverage in your day-to-day world. So any questions that folks have that they would like to put in the chat, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so if you can come off mute, feel free to join us. I think there might be a way to come on stage because I can moderate and bring people on stage. If not, feel free to add your questions in the chat and I can read it out verbally and Penelope can answer. Yeah, so I'm just watching the chat in case any questions come up. And yes, Ariana also mentioned you can hit the ask to share audio and video button, which I believe might be towards the bottom of the screen, in which case you'll pop up in my moderation queue and I can bring you up. Oh, top right of the video window. Thanks. Yeah, so I think Penelope, I think you share a lot of great personal and work examples, right, from the multiple different kind of organization you have been in. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the questions I had, which I love to hear more, is as a product leader, how do you balance between, as you mentioned, the time when you're spending on customer delight? Because in my mind, I feel like as an IC, that's an integral part of work. But when you become a product leader, you have people management responsibility, you have alignment responsibility. So it's often very challenging, I think, as a people manager and product leader to still have your ears to the ground and interface with customers as much as you used to. So we'd love to hear some of the tactics you use to address that.
Yep. No, I think, yes. So I think it's key, obviously, for all of us to be really close to the customer, as well as a product leader. Our team does look to us for having some insights on our customers, on the market, on trends. So it is important to carve out that time. And that could be, it could be reading market research. It could be strategizing with other people in the company. For some people, it could be going out with the sales team and talking to prospects. So there's a variety of ways to satisfy that, which is great. And it also could just be digging into the data of the user experience in your site and really looking at the user data and figuring out what people's experiences are like. So I think that there's a variety of ways to do it. I agree that as a leader, there's a lot more demands on your time. And so you have to be intentional about carving it out.
I love that. Yeah, I think one of the areas that I found to be successful, and I'm glad you brought up the sales team as well as the data team, is the way I think of it is often when I was an IC, I think a lot of the time it's more push where I have to go and find information, whether that be having a lot of the conversations or proactively. And I think one of the benefits of being kind of more senior and positioned as a product leader is to start encouraging more pull. And the way I think of that is how do I encourage people to proactively share info to inform me? And I think sometimes with that decision-making power, right, you're able to get more of that proactive sharing as opposed to having to push and pull out of folks.
Definitely. Yeah. And also, sometimes what we do is we might prioritize for the whole team to listen in on customer calls and what is the customer experience like? Why are they calling? What is the problem that they're having that generated the call in the first place? And then how does that experience evolve? And so we do that a lot in my current role, and I find that that is really great because not only does it give me, but also my whole team direct experience with an actual live customer, it sends the message to the team that, hey, this is important. Look, my leader is here and engaged. So yeah, it's really important.
That is crucial. Yeah. And I think finding, as you mentioned, when you're saying customer calls, I also think about ways that you can hop on the existing calls, because I think that scheduling piece, right, is often what prevents people. And as PMs, we all know that our calendar already look pretty unmanageable. So sometimes it's hard to proactively schedule that. And some of the ways I found that's super helpful, going back to sales, right, is joining existing calls already set up and scheduled either by our pre-sales team or even post-sales in customer success, and really getting to just be there to present and say, I'm here to listen and ask some questions, but please continue as you would with normal cadence, which is fantastic as well. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any questions pop up. I do see more people in the room. So just wanted to shout out again. If you would like to join us, on the top right of your screen, there's a button that says Ask to Share Audio and Video. If you'd like to come on stage, feel free to press that button and I'll be able to bring you up from the moderation queue. If not, feel free to add your questions in the chat and I can read it out verbally so that Penelope can answer as well. Great, we have a question from Dina. All right, so Dina asks, do you have suggestions when customers are more internal, such as working on the platform and where engineers, customer service are often my customers?
Yeah, so I was in that very position recently. So a few weeks ago, I just recently changed roles. So yes, in my previous role, my primary customers were other product managers and engineers, and in some cases, customer service professionals. And I think it is a little bit of a shift. And I think it's still important, though, to keep an understanding of, okay, my platform, it impacts the end user external to my company. And so it's it's critical to understand that impact, but to really think about, okay, the product managers and the engineers and the customer services people that I work with, I have to solve their problems. So for example, it might be difficult for this product manager to build the journey that they want to build on my platform. How do I make that easier? Can I give them some tools to do that? Is there, so somebody else earlier in the chat had said, uplifting to a new platform, that can take a lot of time. That was one of the things that my team helped with. So they built a tool, a development toolkit to automate a big part of the process of uplifting from one version of the platform to the next version of the platform. And that was, again, specifically in response to feedback from other product managers and engineers about what they wanted us to solve for them. So it is a mind shift. You are solving different problems, but they are all really important problems to be solving.
That's great. Yeah, as you were saying that, it resonates from maybe a B2B2C perspective as well,
Yes.
right? Which is ultimately, as a platform product manager, you're serving other internal teams who are ultimately your B2B, as you would if you work with, I don't know, external partners or system integrators and such, but they are serving an end customer, and you're ultimately needing to share that insight of end user to help inform your partners in order to deliver. So I think being able to frame that is super important. Yeah. Great. And another question from Emily, and I think we'll wrap up the call since we are a couple minutes over, but thank you for folks who are still staying on. Question from Emily: how do you best prioritize new initiatives when everything feels important?
Yeah, it all comes down, well, it comes down to dates and value. in the very shortest version of that answer. Dates meaning, is there a regulatory date? Is there a contractual date? Usually those things have to take priority over everything if there's a date involved, because you got to meet that date. But then it's about value. So it could be value to the customer, it could be value to the company, it could be, moving the needle on one of your OKRs that you're trying to deliver on this year. But it really does come down to that value. And yes, it can force really tough decisions. But as long as you're really clear about here's the value, then it usually is pretty succinct conversation. I think the key is just ensuring that all your stakeholders have visibility into those OKRs, the metrics, and that value.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, and I think this goes back to your earlier point about regularly revisit your product strategy, right? And if you have that kind of as the golden document that you refer to, then it becomes an easier conversation to ask and pose the question, does this move us toward our North Star, or does this help us achieve our goal?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. So I know there's one more question for Regan, but in the essence of time, perhaps Penelope, if you have a few minutes, answering in chat directly, so I won't read it out on screen.
Sure.
But I want to take this chance to thank you again for sharing your presentation, your insights with us. I learned a lot, and I think from the fact of how engaged the audience have been and the questions in the chatter, I'm positive that everyone's taken a lot of golden nuggets away from this session. As a wrap up, I believe there's a kind of open-ended networking mixer after this. So if folks are available, please feel free to stay. You can go back to that people menu tab, and I think you'll be able to dive back into a mixer matchup. Feel free to use that. And again, final reminder, we are in the room with senior product leaders. This is a space for you. And I hope beyond learning, you're also getting a chance to create and make new connections with other attendees, as well as Penelope. So definitely click on Penelope's profile, reach out to her, connect on LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation flowing. And I look forward to seeing all of you in our future product blenders. Thank you again, Penelope. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much. It was so great having you here, Lisa. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It was great to have the chat.
Thank you all. See you either in the mixer or see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.